The dispatch crackled, a broken symphony of static and urgency. Officer Miller, respond to a domestic disturbance at 14, Hemlock Drive. Caller reported, unintelligible screaming. Proceed with caution. Hemlock Drive was usually quiet, a manicured slice of suburban tranquility. Tonight, though, the air hummed with an unsettling quiet. An oppressive silence that hung heavy, a stark contrast to the screaming dispatch alluded to. My boots crunched on the gravel driveway as I approached the house, the sound amplified in the stillness. The front door was ajar, a sliver of darkness promising something wrong. I drew my weapon, my heart hammering against my ribs. Years on the force hadn't dulled the edge of apprehension. Every call was a gamble, a roll of the dice in a game where the stakes were high. Police. Announce yourselves. I called out, my voice a practiced blend of authority and caution. Only silence answered. I pushed the door open further, stepping into the dimly lit living room. The scene that greeted me wasn't what I expected. No overturned furniture, no broken glass, no signs of a struggle. Just a sterile, almost surgical, orderliness that felt profoundly wrong. Then I saw them. Two figures lay on the floor, perfectly symmetrical. At first glance, they were human. Roughly the right size, positioned as if they were sleeping. But as I got closer, nausea churned in my stomach. They were dissected. But not in the way you'd find in a morgue. The skin, the flesh, the bones, all gone. Vanished, as if dissolved. What remained were the nervous systems. Two complete, perfectly intact nervous systems, laid out meticulously on the polished hardwood floor. A grotesque parody of human connection. Every nerve, every ganglion, every synapse was visible, glistening in the dim light like dew-covered spiderwebs. The brain, a pale pink mass of folds and fissures, pulsed faintly. The spinal cord, a thick, sinuous rope, snaked down the floor, branching into countless threads that splayed out across the room. My gun felt heavy in my hand, useless against this. What was I supposed to do? Arrest a network of neurons? I moved closer, my training battling the primal urge to flee. I needed to understand. Was this some kind of ritual? Some horrific art installation? The air crackled with an almost palpable energy, a low hum that resonated deep within my bones. As I knelt beside one of the entities, I noticed something even more unsettling. The neural pathways were active. Signals were firing, tiny sparks of electricity dancing across the surface of the brain. It was as if these exposed nervous systems were still thinking. I could almost feel something, a faint echo of emotion, a whisper of fear and love. The impossible thought flashed through my mind, were they still conscious? Were they trapped, aware, within this living nightmare? Suddenly, one of the brains flickered violently, the neural activity spiking. A jolt of pure, raw emotion slammed into me, an overwhelming wave of terror and desperation. I stumbled back, clutching my head, a scream building in my throat. The sensation vanished as quickly as it came, leaving me breathless and shaking. I knew, with a chilling certainty, that I was looking at the victims of something beyond human comprehension. Something that had stripped them bare, not just physically, but existentially, leaving behind only the raw, exposed core of their being. I backed away slowly, my eyes fixed on the glistening mass of nerves. I couldn't help them. I couldn't even understand what had happened to them. All I could do was report it, become a footnote in a case that would likely remain unsolved, a dark stain on the already tarnished tapestry of the city. I stumbled out of the house, gasping for air, the image of the two exposed nervous systems seared into my mind. The quiet of Hemlock Drive felt even more oppressive now, a suffocating blanket of unknowable horror. As I waited for backup, I knew one thing for sure, I would never look at a human being the same way again. I had seen what lay beneath the skin, the hidden network of thought and feeling that made us who we are. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that it could all be stripped away in an instant, leaving behind nothing but the cold, stark reality of the nervous system. A raw, exposed testament to the fragility of existence. The static crackled in my ear, a lonely sound in the dead of night. Dispatch's voice, tinny and urgent, cut through it. "Officer Davies, we have a distress call. Rural Route 12, about 5 miles past the old Henderson farm. Caller reported, strange noises, possible chanting. Handle with caution." Rural Route 12 was a dead end, a ribbon of cracked asphalt swallowed by the woods. The Henderson farm was a local legend, abandoned decades ago after Old Man Henderson vanished without a trace. Now, it was just crumbling barns and overgrown fields, the kind of place that sent a shiver down your spine even in broad daylight. My gut churned. This felt off. Too far, too vague. But a call was a call. I switched on my dashcam, grabbed my flashlight, and bumped down the rutted road, the woods closing in like silent, watchful guards. The farmhouse was silhouetted against the pale moonlight, a gothic silhouette against the inky sky. The chanting, faint at first, grew louder as I approached, a low, guttural drone that resonated in my chest. I parked a safe distance away, killed the engine, and drew my weapon. The silence that followed was even more unsettling. I made my way to the front door, its paint peeling like sunburned skin. It hung open, revealing only darkness within. "Police? Anyone inside?" My voice echoed into the void. The chanting resumed, now closer, more intense. It seemed to be coming from the back of the house. I moved cautiously, flashlight beam cutting through the oppressive gloom. The air was thick with a cloying sweetness, like incense mixed with something metallic. Something that made my stomach clench. I found them in the old root cellar, accessed through a rickety wooden trapdoor. What I saw down there. I still wake up screaming sometimes. A circle of figures, cloaked and hooded, swayed rhythmically around a makeshift altar. Flickering candlelight danced across their faces, revealing eyes that burned with a feverish intensity. And on the altar, tied and gagged, was a young woman, her eyes wide with terror. "Police! Drop to the ground!" I yelled, my voice cracking. My hand trembled, but I kept my gun trained on them. They didn't move. The chanting intensified, rising to a fever pitch. One of them, a lanky figure in the center of the circle, raised a long, curved knife. Then, understanding dawned, cold and sickening. This wasn't a random crime. This was a ritual. And it was a setup. I remembered the vague distress call, the isolated location, the unnerving feeling I had from the beginning. They had lured me here. The leader spoke, his voice raspy and distorted, like a broken record. "The protector has arrived. The offering is complete." My blood ran cold. "Protector? Offering?" He smiled, a chillingly vacant expression. "Our Lord demands sacrifice. The blood of the innocent, and the protector, to ensure his reign." They lunged. I fired. Twice. One robed figure crumpled, but the others kept coming, their faces contorted in religious fervor. I was forced to retreat, scrambling back towards the trapdoor. They were too fast. They grabbed me, their hands surprisingly strong. The knife flashed in the candlelight. I fought, but there were too many of them. They wrestled me to the ground, ripping my gun from my grasp. The last thing I saw before they forced the gag into my mouth was the altar, the terrified young woman, and the glint of the knife. I was their sacrifice. They had called 911 not for help, but for a victim. They had used the law to break it. They had used my duty to trap me. And out here, in the forgotten heart of the woods, miles from anyone who could hear me scream, I was going to die. The chilling realization washed over me, a final, agonizing wave. My sacrifice, their key to, whatever twisted reality they craved. The chanting reached a crescendo. The knife rose. And the darkness closed in. The rain was coming down in sheets, blurring the flashing lights of the cruisers ahead. My wipers were on full blast, but it felt like I was peering through a waterfall. Another crucifixion. That made 4 in as many weeks, each victim posed in the most gruesome way imaginable. The media was having a field day, and the city was on the verge of panic. My name is Detective Marco Bellini. I've seen things in my 10 years on the force that'd curdle milk, but these were different. They felt personal, almost theatrical. The killer wasn't just murdering, he was making a statement. Chief Thompson met me at the perimeter tape, his face as gray as the storm clouds overhead. "Anything, Marco?" I shook my head, the rain plastering my hair to my forehead. "Same MO, Chief. Young, male, athletic build. Crucified upside down, thorns woven into their scalp. No signs of struggle. Clean kill, probably bled out before they were even nailed. Forensics is working on it, but I doubt they'll find anything we haven't seen before. Damn it, Bellini. We're running out of time. The mayor's breathing down my neck, the public wants answers. We've got nothing. No leads, no witnesses, just these atrocities." He was right. We were running on fumes. The only consistent thread we had was the 911 calls. Each victim had made a frantic call just minutes before their abduction. The dispatcher, a woman named Sarah Miller, had logged the calls, but in each case, she'd marked the location as a false alarm, a prank call, something dismissible. Because of that, valuable time was lost, and by the time patrol units investigated, the victims were gone. It had seemed like a colossal oversight, a tragic coincidence. But I couldn't shake the feeling gnawing at my gut. "Chief," I said, raising my voice to be heard over the downpour. "I want to look into the 911 calls again. Specifically, Sarah Miller's logs." He narrowed his eyes, but he was out of options. "All right, Bellini. But make it quick. I need you back here, leading the ground team." I didn't argue. I turned and headed back to the precinct, the image of the latest victim burned into my mind. The records room was cold and sterile, the hum of the servers a constant drone. I pulled up Sarah Miller's logs for the past month, and started scrolling. My gut clenched tighter with each entry. The more I looked, the more glaring the discrepancies became. Minor details, alterations in the address, misinterpretations of the caller's distress. It was subtle, almost undetectable, but it was there. A deliberate pattern. I found the recording of the latest victim's call. His voice was panicked, barely coherent, but he'd clearly stated his location, Market and Elm, across from the old church. Sarah, in her calm, reassuring voice, had logged it as, Market and Elm, possible prank, caller sounds intoxicated. By the time patrol arrived, the man was gone. Fueled by a growing sense of dread, I pulled up Sarah's file. A clean record, 5 years on the job, excellent performance reviews. Nothing out of the ordinary. Except for one thing. A small detail, almost insignificant. In the emergency contact field, she had listed her brother, Daniel Miller. The name rang a bell. I rummaged through the cold case files, searching for anything related to the victims. And then I found it. A missing person report filed 2 years ago. A young man named Michael Bellwether disappeared without a trace. He had been Sarah and Daniel Miller's childhood friend. The friends had a falling out when Daniel's sister and Michael dated. A wave of nausea washed over me. Could it be this simple? This twisted? I grabbed my phone and dialed dispatch. "This is Bellini. I need you to run a background check on Daniel Miller, DOB August 12, 1988. I need everything you can find." While I waited, I pulled up Daniel Miller's social media. His profile was public, filled with cryptic posts, biblical quotes, and disturbing artwork depicting scenes of judgment and retribution. A recurring theme in his art was the upside-down cross. The dispatcher came back on the line. "Bellini, we've got a match. Daniel Miller, multiple assault charges, all dismissed due to lack of evidence. Currently employed as a blacksmith. Also, he has a documented history of severe mental illness, paranoid schizophrenia and religious delusions." My blood ran cold. A blacksmith. Possessed by religious delusions. And his sister, a 911 dispatcher, feeding him information, leading us away from the hunt. I slammed the phone down and ran out of the records room, adrenaline surging through my veins. I knew where I had to go. The blacksmith's shop, on the outskirts of town. The rain was still falling, the city lights blurring into streaks of color. I arrived at the shop, a dilapidated building surrounded by a chain-link fence. No lights were on. I drew my weapon, my heart pounding in my chest. I kicked the gate open and moved cautiously towards the entrance. The door was unlocked. I pushed it open, the hinges groaning in protest. The air inside was thick with the smell of metal and coal. The forge was cold, the embers long dead. Tools hung on the walls, glinting in the dim light filtering through the grimy windows. Then I saw it. In the center of the room, bathed in the eerie glow of a bare bulb hanging from the ceiling, was a crucifix. Not a religious icon, but a functional cross, made of heavy iron. And hanging from it, upside down, was Sarah Miller. Her eyes were wide with terror, her mouth gagged. Blood trickled down her face from the thorns woven into her scalp. "Welcome, detective," a voice boomed from the shadows. Daniel Miller stepped forward, his eyes burning with religious fervor. He was massive, his arms thick with muscle from years of hammering metal. In his hand, he held a hammer. "I am purging this city of its wickedness," he declared, his voice trembling with righteous anger. "And my sister, she has betrayed me. She has led the wolves to my door." I raised my weapon, my finger tightening on the trigger. "Let her go, Miller. This ends now." He laughed, a harsh, guttural sound that echoed through the shop. "It only begins, detective. The judgment has only just begun." The following moments were a blur of adrenaline and gunfire. He charged at me with the hammer, a terrifying figure fueled by madness and religious zeal. I fired, the bullets hitting their mark, but he kept coming, his rage pushing him beyond the limitations of pain. I finally managed to subdue him, wrestling the hammer away and pinning him to the ground. He was still ranting, his words a jumbled mess of scripture and madness. I finally made it to Sarah, who was hanging, eyes still full of terror. I tried to remove the nails from her feet but had no success, so I cut her down and carried her to the car before calling the ambulance. As the sirens wailed in the distance, I sat there in the back of an ambulance, both relieved and horrified. I had stopped the killer, but at what cost? I had uncovered a conspiracy that reached into the heart of the police force and the people I worked beside. The rain had finally stopped, the clouds parting to reveal a sliver of moon. But the darkness inside me remained, a cold, gnawing emptiness that would never truly disappear.